9 reasons why icing injuries is wrong. Now we're going to dive right into this. There's many, many reasons why this topic is so controversial. The number one is that we're still widely using outdated information, and we're still pointing back to, oh, well, this is what we were taught. In this community of health and wellness, the information that we're getting and we're learning about the body changes pretty much on a daily basis. And so we have to be willing to let go of what we once learned due to new information coming in. Now, the RICE method, we're going to get into this further a little bit later, but the RICE method, which stands for rest, ice, compress, and elevate, is widely understood and known by most of the community. In fact, if you ask someone, you sprain your ankle, what should you do? Most people will quote the RICE method. It's easy to remember, but the problem is that was created in the 1970s. It was 1978 when Dr. Gabe Mirkin came up with the RICE method. And even him himself has said many, many times, due to the new information that we have, that information is wrong, that it's dated, that there are new and better ways to help the body heal and regenerate due to a better understanding and knowledge that we now have. Additionally, this is also kind of the disinformation age. There's so many non-experts and non-scientific people that are throwing out information, and even though it sounds good and makes sense, it's not backed by scientific evidence. And so one of the things when it comes to studies, there's always people quoting a study, right? But anybody can create a study and they can skew it to show what it is they're trying to prove. And so one of the most important things that when we're looking at information, is it peer reviewed? Which means that a doctor or a group is going to create a study, and they're going to put that study up for public scrutiny within that industry and within that group of people to say, hey, look at my study, pick it apart. Did I do things right? What do you think about the results? Did I perform it the appropriate way? And that allows the collective group to be able to ensure that not only is that the outcome unbiased, but is it accurate? And so that's one of the hard things is that I actually remember as a kid when high fructose corn syrup was coming under scrutiny, there was an ad that I saw at just a TV commercial, and they were talking about how healthy corn was for the body and talking about how fructose corn syrup just comes from corn and corn's healthy. So how could high fructose corn syrup be bad for you? And even as a kid, I remember in the bottom right-hand corner, it said paid for by the American Corn Association or something like that. And so there's a lot of things you have to look at when it comes to the research that gets really confusing. Who are the physicians doing it? Do they have anything to gain by the outcome? Who's funding it? And did they even follow the processes appropriately? So there's so much to look at. It's really difficult for someone who's not in that industry to really figure it out. So we do have to rely on people that are focused on science being done appropriately to get the information that we're really looking for. But again, in summary, it's hard to unlearn stuff. So even though something was what we thought to be true 50 years ago, it might not be true now due to new information, and that's hard to let go sometimes. And to get something to be widely accepted, it takes time. Like for me, I can go to a seminar and I can learn new information based upon a recent case study that came out, and I can pivot immediately and say, hey, here's how now we're going to do stuff. But, a system like the healthcare system in the United States, it can take 40, 50 years for something to be widely accepted by everybody and then therefore taught at a large scale. That's why you see some of these practitioners at lower levels or that are just smaller have some of that breaking information, while a doctor that you go to who was, trained in med school 30 years ago by textbooks that even at that point were 10, 15 years old, and he's still teaching the same things he learned in med school, it's old information. So when it comes down to it, it's a really difficult and polarizing topic strictly because of those two primary things. It's hard to unlearn information, and sometimes that information is just straight up wrong. So let's dive a little deeper into these 9 reasons as to why icing injuries is wrong.